Welcome to the Lightning Talks session. My name is Nicole Schultz, and I am a librarian for geospatial and numeric data at the University of Michigan, one of the member institutions for the Big Ten Academic Alliance Geospatial Information Network. I will introduce each speaker before their presentation. Time permitting, we will have a brief Q&A portion after all talks have concluded. You can ask questions with the Zoom Q&A feature, and you can upvote others' questions. I will moderate the Q&A, so please be sure to note which speaker, especially since we have 6 talks, your question is directed to. Each presentation will be no longer than 8 minutes, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. Our first presenter is Dr. Arpan Yagnik. Dr. Yagnik is a renowned expert and coach of fear and creativity and an author of multiple books. He is a columnist, TEDx speaker, and holds a faculty position at Penn State Erie. He trains high-ranking generals and officers of national defense forces and senior commandants of special forces in defeating fear and creative leadership. He was a commissioner on the Pennsylvania Governor's Advisory Commission and convener and chairperson of IOFC's Global Youth Team, which is an advocacy body for youth of 60 countries. Dr. Yagnik's talk is entitled The Role of Fear and Creativity in the World of Maps, and this talk has no slides. Please go ahead and start your presentation, Dr. Yagnik.
Thank you so very much for giving me the space. I want to start with this question that what if we view maps not just as tools, but as emotional and imaginative landscapes. Every time I look at a map, I don't get a neutral feeling. I feel emotions, sometimes fear, sometimes I feel the presence of creativity, and it shapes my imagined reality, my subjective reality, my objective reality. There is a map behind me that many of you can see. This map has been taken today. This is a map from the US State Department, and this is a map of the travel advisories across the world. So you can see where the world is safe. The portion that you see is blue, or actually white. It's all right, it's good. Blue is sort of the area that you can go around. But if you look at the vast majority of the world around you, there is nowhere to really go. You have to be either extra cautious or just choose not to travel. And fear of the unknown, fear of losing what you have has led to a lot of different advancement in creative technologies. While the charting and the recharting of the map and the shaping and the reshaping of the territories has happened, we have seen civilizations become extremely creative to stop losing that little area. And when we talk, I was thinking about this talk, fear is our own way of remote sensing. In the world of maps, and now we talk about remote sensing, but fear is our own version of remote sensing that makes us do so many things or just paralyzes us and freezes us. So the only way to get over that through is by being creative in drawing some of these boundaries and lines, be it dotted or not dotted at all. So I come from India, and I'm at the moment in Penn State. But when we look at the Indian map, every time it changes. And oftentimes, because there is a portion at the top, the Jammu and Kashmir, and a big portion of it is in conflict. So that in some publications, we have the map. We have grown up with a certain map, with a certain vision, but then it keeps changing, and it changes you also as an individual. So the role of fear and creativity in the world of map is very integral. We use all these technologies. We've heard something so brilliant about beavers as the keynote before this, and how beavers, since they are not comfortable on land and they are comfortable in water, they create an ecosystem around them, an ecosystem of comfort around them, and that has such large and major implications. Similarly, humans also have created these ecosystems and used different lines to ensure that they are protected, that they are comfortable within a certain area, and beyond those lines of demarcation, there could be some dangers looming. So with different technology, the lines have become much more solid. They don't move as much. But then with aggressions, with war, major lines can change. What will happen to the lines of sovereign states and nations such as Russia and Ukraine in the next 5 years is a big question. And there is fear at the bottom of it. Fear of having someone that you don't like right next to the line that you've drawn, or there is some greed as well. So these are all questions, and reimagining the world of maps is a creative exercise. I teach creativity in my class, and oftentimes I will take a south up map to my class and show it to the students, and it starts giving them headache that, oh, this does not make sense. So we have gotten used to and accustomed to something that is otherwise quite dynamic and also quite fleeting. And we have developed an attachment towards this particular entity, the static nature of a map, which is not supposed to be very static. So these are all some complex issues that we need to keep in mind and go further as technology starts getting advanced. I don't belong to the field that you all belong to, but my specialty lies in fear. And fear itself is a subjective reality. Now, how does one subjective reality go into something which is like a world of map and can create so many geopolitical ripples is something which can't really imagine, but you require creativity. So this is just an attempt to sensitize all the scholars from the Big Ten universities, students, and from the other community that is interested in the work, and that going forward, please also do consider the role of fear as a variable in how the entire world of maps is getting created, destroyed, recreated again. And most importantly, and my final point before I end, is that the map behind me, the map of the world, which is right now in huge trouble. This is so much of the world. While we are so connected, we still cannot go. So how can we eliminate, how can we defeat fear to ensure that this entire planet becomes accessible to everyone and becomes accessible to much more of the human values that exist? So with that, I conclude. Thank you all so very much, and love to have some more discussion at a later point. Nicole, back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yagnik, for your presentation. Next, I'll introduce our next speaker, Ethan Bledsoe. He is an environmental science and data science third-year student at Northwestern University. His research focuses on using GIS, remote sensing, and statistical modeling to address climate and environmental justice challenges. He has worked on air pollution analysis, climate risk adaptation, and conservation planning, aiming to create data-driven solutions for communities and ecosystems under pressure. Ethan's talk is entitled Conservation on a Slippery Slope, using GIS and remote sensing to predict and prevent land degradation. Go ahead and start, Ethan.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ethan Bledsoe, and today I'm sharing a conservation project that I conducted in Mandurriacu, Ecuador. My goal was to understand where erosion was happening in the area, why it's happening, and what tools we can use to stop it before it's too late. Next slide, please. Globally, we lose 36 billion tons of soil every year. That's not just numbers, it's lost farmland, damaged ecosystems, and increased disaster risk. In Ecuador, the issue is just as urgent. In the Rio Chimbo watershed, erosion reaches 27 tons per hectare per year. And in southern Ecuador's Catamayo Basin, over a quarter of the land is affected. These aren't isolated cases. They represent a larger regional pattern that threatens biodiversity, water quality, food systems, and the people that live there. Next slide, please. Hello? Okay, sorry. As of 2022, forests still make up around 70% of the landscape, but their continuity is being disrupted. Roads and plantations are fragmenting habitats and exposing vulnerable slopes, which forest cover is lost. When forest cover is lost, erosion begins. And in this terrain, this process happens quickly and with serious consequences. Next slide, please. Zooming in, my research took place in the Mandurriacu Reserve, located in northwestern Ecuador within the Choco-Andean corridor, one of the most biodiverse and threatened ecosystems on Earth. The studies area that I had spans 120 square kilometers, encompassing the towns of Villaflora and Cielo Verde. The Mandurriacu River cuts through the center and joins the Guayabamba River, which feeds into the Mandurriacu hydroelectric dam at the southern edge. The red outline marks the study zone. It's a fragmented, high-stakes landscape where conservation, development, and community needs converge on fragile terrain. Next slide, please. My work had three main goals. First, identify erosion hotspots using a GIS-based model. I wanted to understand where the worst erosion was happening and why. Second, build a predictive model for vegetation health to forecast expected changes into 2025 and 2026. And then third, prioritize areas for reforestation based off erosion risk. If we know which areas are most at risk, we can better target conservation action. Next slide, please. I used a mix of field and digital tools like the Gaia GPS app to mark erosion sites in ArcGIS, R, and Python to run my models. My data sets included mostly high resolution satellite imagery from Sentinel-2, but also various data sets from Ecuadorian ministries. But just as important as the tools were, the values were also the values behind the work. This research was conducted on the traditional lands of the Quichua people, and I made sure it was non-extractive. No samples were taken, just data and collaboration with local people. Next slide, please. To quantify erosion, I used the Roosley model, the revised universal soil loss equation. Next slide, please. It's basically an equation that combines 5 environmental variables: rainfall, R, soil erodibility, K, topography, especially slope length and steepness, which is LS, vegetation cover or the plants, which is C, and then the land management practices, P. Multiply them all and you get a spatial estimate of annual soil loss. Next slide, please. For visualizing the erosion risk, here's how the different erosion drivers looked on the landscape. Rainfall is highest in the southwest. You can also see the soil erodibility and the topography. In the bottom right is when you combine them all into one map. If you can go to the next slide, you can see it a lot better. The red zones are the top erosions hotspots. So basically, I labeled 6 of the highest areas, and these became the focus for future conservation planning. And I actually went into the field with a local ranger to verify these areas. Next slide, please. In zone 3, we saw active riverbank erosion, exposed roots, fallen trees, and undercut slopes. Unfortunately, these are the only results I was able to get for 5 and 6 because they were near the reserve, but they weren't reachable to a lack of trails. But the erosion picked up in the model likely is from the steep slopes in the area. Next slide, please. Next. Okay. Yeah, this is good. Zone 1 and Zone 2 are kind of what I like to call the poster childs of erosion. They're steep, barren hillsides cut for roads and infrastructure. And then Zone 4 was a little bit different. It showed erosion under an intact canopy due to the trails in the reserve, a reminder that slope and soil can drive the degradation. So next slide, please. I also started calculating the uncertainty across the study area for each of this inputs. The map on the right shows where the predictions are most uncertain, mostly near the southern portions. Next slide, please. Now moving on, the second goal of my project was to build a predictive model for vegetation health. For this, I use NDVI, or the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, through satellite imagery to measure how green and healthy the land is. Next slide, please. I focus on the southern portion of the study area because it showed the most active land use change, particularly around Cielo Verde, where a major highway to the road is under construction. So the linear regression revealed the downward NDVI trends into the future that I was expecting. Next slide, please. This shows the slope, a measure of how vegetation has changed over time. So the red areas are the declining vegetation, and you can see virtually everywhere it is declining. Especially you can kind of see there's this like the road that's being constructed on the left, the like really red area. And that's what I wanted to be picking up. So if this was incorporated, it could create potential real-time conservation responses. Next slide, please. And then finally, I also compared erosion risk across next slide. Across the 4 conservation areas to inform the reforestation strategy. Sorry, there was a little bit of lag throughout this presentation, so I think I don't have a lot of time to cover this, but if you could go to the next slide. So in terms of future directions, I would say dynamic NDVI-based modeling would help improve my model, and basically updating the model as new data was fed into it. And then also I would definitely recommend that the geospatial portals where you access the data in Ecuador created more scientist friendly to make them research faster, and then also able to make smarter decisions. So now if you could go to my final slide. So basically my project showed how maps, models, and local knowledge can work together to support conservation. Data can guide, but really it's about the people, the farmers, the rangers, the residents who make conservation real, whether it's building trails, planting trees. The work has to be local. And in Mandurriacu, that means uplifting traditional practices like chakra agroforestry and terracing, shown here on the right. They're time and time again proved to reduce erosion and restore soil health, and they've existed for thousands of years. Because what's at stake on this slippery slope isn't just soil, it's the future of communities and ecosystems learning to hold their ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ethan, for your presentation. Next, let me introduce our speaker, Tara Anthony. Tara is a Geographic Information Systems Specialist in the Donald W. Hamer Center for Maps and Geospatial Information at Penn State University Library since 2013, and a BTA GIN member since 2021. Tara holds an MSLS, MEd, MS in Geography, and a BA in Geography. Tara's talk is entitled Teaching About Communities, Integrating Open Geospatial and Map Resources into Projects. Go ahead, Tara.
Thank you, Nicole. You can go to the next slide. So some of the key takeaways from today's session would be I'm highlighting a class that I worked with that we used the GeoPortal in, along with some workshop activities as well, and also some other library engagement activities in terms of a display and our many library guides that you might want to consider when working with geospatial data in communities. So these examples may be helpful to instructors, faculty, researchers, and students looking for local GIS data, maps, related to communities that you might be studying for various reasons. It could be helpful for working with undergraduates, graduate students as well, and really can be scaled based on the level that you're looking at. Next slide, please. In terms of a course I wanted to highlight, this was an engagement with a faculty member in a history class, the 20th Century City, in which students picked topics that they were interested in and focused in the class session around New York City. We looked at a number of different resources, including the BTA GeoPortal, other types of library subscribed products, some site-specific resources as well. And if you go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about how we use the BTA GeoPortal when we were searching for New York City resources. So as you see through many of the presentations today, there's a variety of different types of maps, different types of geospatial GIS data resources, whether it's data sets, web resources, and other types of websites folks might be able to discover. So students had an opportunity to explore what they were looking for within the GeoPortal via searching for keywords. This is just showing a search for New York City, but that was also modified, to get at other places that they're looking at as well. Or they could explore the map to hone in on what resources that could be of interest. And as you go to the next slide, I want to point out a little bit about how people might discover things through the GeoPortal. So they could look and see the different types of providers that, in this case, for looking for New York City, you can see there's a broad range. There's many resources from Rutgers University, but then you can see also other institutions that might have items of interest, and also different types of resource classes. This shows that some of the resource types, whether they be fire insurance maps or other types of maps as well. So that's just a little bit for a specific class, but that could be applied to other contexts as well. And if you could go to the next slide, please. Another example of thinking about how you can be working with communities in the geospatial data sets, we explored by offering a couple different workshops this past semester. So we offered a session called Amplify Your Work with Geospatial Civic Data. This was a session that focused on government sources, nonprofit, education, and library materials, highlighting those from different types of sources. This was a workshop that was developed from attending the Civic Switchboard Institute this past fall. It's another way that as a library can provide information and connections to many of these resources that our users could benefit from. There also was a session specifically on the GeoPortal for our users as well. And if you could go to the next slide. When talking to users around community GIS data sets, one of the other ways that we connect with users is through research consultations. So this kind of highlights a little bit about many of the different types of data that one can be looking at, whether it's at the state, county level, ArcGIS online type of content, open data portals, searching the GeoPortal. This is just a sample of that to show kind of really what folks could be looking for when they're looking at different communities for their GIS needs. Some of these questions come in from students that might be familiar with these types of resources, but then also ones that are very new to maybe looking for these types of resources as well. If you could go to the next slide as well. So when thinking about communities, one of the other ways that we engage is through our student projects. So we have a number of students who we work with within our Maps and Geospatial Center who have various interests around GIS data in different types of ways. So we did a display this semester on civic GIS data that really highlights some different, more like at the state and local level, places that people can go to, whether it's our Center County open data site or other types of resources as well. And we also have a blog post associated with that also, so that students get that experience of kind of going through a project and then communicating about what they found and how they put that together. So that's another way that you can be thinking about if you are working with geospatial data sets. And you could go to the next slide. That's the one I'm speaking about. That would be a way to really highlight the data resources that you have within your area, or maybe what you're maybe working on with your projects with specific researchers. And if you could go to the next slide now. Another way about working with geospatial data sets at the community or more regional level is through many library guides. So I have the next two slides that really focus on many of the GIS BTA institutional guides that have some sort of connection through regional data sources, community data sets, things like that, that it could be helpful if you are working with these areas or working maybe from another institution. So keep that in mind. Depending on what your region of study, this can be helpful to really connect with the libraries within that area to see maybe what type of resources they're pointing users to, what types of things that might be familiar to them on these guides as well. And if you could go to the next guide as well. Next page. Thank you. So again, kind of just showing a snapshot at these so that folks have an idea that these could be, imagery explorers, data centers, ArcGIS hub sites, other types of resources that if you're studying an area or looking for a particular community, or even getting to know an area that maybe you haven't been doing that much research in, connecting with the library's guides could be a very helpful way to kind of see what could be existing in that area. And if you go to the next slide, the next couple slides just kind of list these links to the guide resources that I included here. And then on the next slide, those are some of the resources that really kind of just capture a snapshot of things that folks might want to be looking at when thinking about the types of community data sets that might be incorporated within your research or even in your teaching activities. So I just wanted to mention that whether it's the GeoPortal, some of the different types of county hub sites or other types of data portals could be really helpful to your students or your research projects, along with connecting with some of the library resources that might be in your areas as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tara, for your presentation. Now I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Jong Yoon. He is a PhD candidate in forestry and natural resources at Purdue University. His research focuses on conservation landscape genomics, combining bioinformatics and GIS to understand biodiversity patterns and inform conservation strategies for endangered wildlife. His talk is entitled Geographic Information Integrated with Genomic Information for Wildlife Conservation. You can go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jong Yoon. I'm a PhD student at Purdue University. Today, I want to talk about how to integrate geographic information with genomic information for wildlife conservation from genomicist perspective. Yeah, next slide, please. As a background, I think it's well known that habitat loss and genomic erosion, the decrease in genetic diversity, are two main threats for conservation of threatened and endangered species. And in this regard, ecological and genomic attributes provide two orthogonal perspectives, one on organismal level and the other one on molecular level for conservation challenges. And so GIS and genomics together can identify environmental and genomic conditions that maximize fitness of species and populations of conservation concern. Next slide, please. I just want to briefly talk about modern genomics first, which is represented by whole genome resequencing data at the population scale that enables unprecedented genomic resolution with millions of genetic markers compared to tens or hundreds of genetic markers in the past. And even now, these days, with genome annotation profiles, we can identify which genes or which loci are selective, adaptive, and which loci are non-selective or neutral, we usually say. On the other hand, GIS approaches, we all know that we can analyze spatial patterns and suitable distribution of entities of our interest, including genes and species. Next slide, please. I want to first talk about integrating whole genome resequencing data and ecological niche modeling. For this, we reviewed many previous literature in the past, and we found several approaches to integrate those two methods for assessing vulnerability and identifying local adaptation. The simplest form would be combining ENM and WGR results independently when you interpret the data. So in this case, you can identify key environmental variables associated with local adaptation from ENM and genomics data independently, and then compare and contrast the sets of key variables. A bit more advanced form was to generate a composite vulnerability index, integrating whole genome-based genomic vulnerability and also ENM-based ecological vulnerability or niche shift. A more advanced form was reinforcing the evidence of local adaptation from one analysis with the other analysis. So in this case, you will unify those two approaches in the analytical steps. So for example, you will identify the locally adapted populations from ENM and use that information as a prior in population genomic structure analysis. Of course, you can do one of the two first, and then employ that information for the other. So in a so-called ENM-informed adaptive genomics approach, you will do ENM first. So you will now have key environmental variables and use that in the adaptive genomics when you try to identify adaptive loci. And the other way around is also possible. So you will do adaptive genomics first. So you now have adaptive loci and use that in ENM framework. So you can model the suitable distributions of adaptive genes. Next slide, please. And of course, from the previous slide, you don't have to do all of that by yourself, but I suggested a couple of frameworks that genomics experts and GIS experts can co-work together. Second idea here I'm presenting is GIS layers of genomic metrics. So here you will do analyze genomic metrics, diverse genomic metrics, including genetic diversity, inbreeding levels, and population genetic structure, and interpolate each of them on the landscape so that you can overlay all of them together to combine into a hypothetical single metric of genomic vulnerability or genomic susceptibility. And you can repeat these steps for additional time points so that later you can estimate temporal change of genomic vulnerability. Next slide, please. I want to show you some examples from our lab's ongoing research or previous research that we use some GIS layers from genomic data. So in panel A, you're seeing the gene flow patterns on the landscape of Washington, Oregon, and California towhees for all the individuals or for just males or just females. And here you can see the gene flow patterns with geographic information, and this is more informative than, could you click once? Yeah, this kind of genetic differentiation table, which is much more widely used among geneticists. And in panel B, you're seeing the interpolated heterozygosity among sampled populations of Western chicken turtles around the Houston area. And again, I think this is more informative than, could you click twice? Yeah, this kind of box plot without any geographic information. So these are more informative for conservation practitioners, especially. Next slide, please. And in panel C, you're seeing the continuously plotted individual ancestry coefficient or admixture proportions you're saying of lesser and greater prairie chickens over the geographic space of the southern Great Plains. Yeah, could you click once? With the geographic information, the panel C was more informative than this kind of traditional structure plots that geneticists are using. And in panel D, I'm showing you an example of applying the GIS layer of genomic metrics idea. So here we use the same data of lesser and greater prairie chickens with estimated genetic diversity and population genetic structure and interpolated them on the landscape, combine them together for two different time points, past and future, past and the present, and we could estimate the shift of genomic susceptibility in this case, although we have not modeled the real equation of genomic susceptibility in this case. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, this is all I have for today, and thank you all for listening. I want to thank WAFWA and Indiana DNR and Texas Parks and Wildlife for supporting our lab's research. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speakers are Mariah Rubin and Annika Jensen. Mariah is a graduate student at the University of Washington, pursuing a dual Master of Urban Design and Planning and Master of Public Health and Environmental Health Sciences. Annika Jensen is a senior at the University of Washington, pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Public Health. Their talk is entitled Developing the Washington State Food Rescue Map. You can go ahead.
Great, can you hear me? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about our ongoing project, which is developing a food rescue opportunity map in Washington. Just want to say thank you to our PI, Emily Hovis, who isn't here but has been directing this project. Next slide. Just quickly, I know it's just introduced, but my name is Mariah Rubin. I'm a graduate student at the University of Washington, working at the intersection of public health and the built environment. Next slide, please.
Hi, I'm Annika Jensen, and I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Washington, and I'm pursuing a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Public Health.
And next slide. So I'm going to be using these terms quite a bit, so I just wanted to take a moment to quickly define them. So surplus and excess food are terms that are sometimes used interchangeably. We're going to be using the term surplus, and it just refers to food that was not used for its original intended purpose. And that is different from food waste, which is food that is not ultimately used or consumed. And then food rescue is a practice of taking edible surplus food and redistributing it. So an example of this would be taking food from a grocery store that was not sold for a variety of reasons and then redistributing it to a food bank to ultimately be consumed. Next slide, please. So food waste is a persistent problem nationwide, and in Washington specifically, there's about 1.2 million tons of surplus food generated annually, with almost 400,000 tons of edible food. Simultaneously, there are many people in Washington who are experiencing food insecurity, meaning they're not able to access food or sufficient or adequate food. And so food rescue presents an opportunity to bridge both gaps by redirecting surplus food to folks who can use it. So on to the next slide. So in 2019, seeing these problems, the Washington State Legislature set some really ambitious goals to work towards reducing food waste. The goals were to reduce annual food waste by 50%. By 2030, so that's coming on up, and in comparison to levels from 2015. Next slide, please. And so in order to meet these goals, the Washington State Department of Ecology developed the Use Food Well Washington Plan, which included 30 recommendations to make improvements throughout the food system. And one of these recommendations was to develop a map to better understand food waste and food flows across the state in order to work towards meeting these really ambitious goals. And so on to the next slide, please. So our project specifically has had a number of goals, really focusing on food rescue. So the first step of our project was identifying reliable data sources, and specifically we want to look at the EPA Excess Food Opportunities Map, which I recommend you all look into. But then once we were able to identify our data sources for the map, we set out to create the actual mapping tool to support food rescue. Simultaneously, we were conducting a survey and interview with folks from the hunger relief sector to assess their capacity to even accept food rescue donations in the first place, and then also to inform our mapping tool development. And then lastly, we wanted to make sure that we would write out a report to share our processes and recommendations for the future. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so as Mariah mentioned in the aims, as part of this project, we conducted a capacity survey and a literature review. And we adapted a survey from a state agency and sent it to hunger relief organizations across Washington. We received 146 responses, representing 143 unique hunger relief organizations from 31 of Washington's 39 counties. We found that 69% of organizations engage in some form of food rescue activity, confirming that the mapping tool is potentially useful for supporting existing food rescue, as well as creating new opportunities. We also conducted an extensive literature review on surplus food and food rescue to inform our policy recommendations for Washington. The three main themes from the literature review are to promote food waste reduction efforts at food businesses, strengthen hunger relief organizations' capacity to rescue more food, and promote food waste reduction efforts and educate in Washington K through 12 schools. We're hoping our map can support current barriers in food rescue that were highlighted in this literature review.
And so next slide, please. So this was our overall process. We started with a really robust data validation process. Restaurants have really high turnover rates, as I'm sure a lot of you know. So it was really important to make sure that our data was up to date to ensure the reliability to actually conduct food rescue operations, while also supporting and creating new partnerships between potential food donors and food recipients. So using local health jurisdiction data, so that's just like public health agencies that we obtained during the pilot phase of our project, we were able to evaluate some major potential data sources. And so we looked at that EPA Excess Food Opportunities map that I mentioned earlier, as well as Data Axle Reference Solutions, which provides a lot of business level data. And our validation process informed our data source selection process, and we ended up using a mix of data sources for our different map layers, prioritizing efficiency and accuracy with a lot of consideration going to how the host of the map, the Washington State Department of Ecology, can upkeep the map over time, taking a lot of consideration about their capacity to do this type of work. And so once we had our data sources, we geocoded using the US Census tool. This was a massive data set, which I'll get into in just a moment. And we put all of our data into ArcGIS Online, and then we used Esri's Experience Builder, which is a web app design tool. And it really fit our need for efficiency while also creating a really intuitive and seamless user experience for map users. Next slide. So ultimately, our map had 5 main data layers to represent the food system across Washington State. We had farms, food service and restaurants, wholesalers and manufacturers, retailers and grocers, as well as hunger relief organizations. There were over 45,000 food establishments and hunger relief organizations represented across our map. And you can see a large representation is food service and restaurants was a big part of the map. And so next slide. So we are working on that report, which is going to include technical recommendations, as well as like a user guide about how we developed our map and those literature and policy recommendations. And our final map will be released this summer and hosted by the Washington State Department of Ecology. And last slide. And thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, our final presentation is by SM Asanula, who is a graduate student at the Department of Geography at The Ohio State University. His research interests include land use, land cover, transportation, spatial analysis, and lately, GeoAI and deep learning applications. SM's talk is entitled Identifying Car Locations and State Using Deep Learning. Please go ahead with your talk.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you today. So before I start, just want to clarify, it's a very simple presentation. I want to talk about my study area is Detroit and how we can all use simple AI tools to extract data for our own research. So next. So before going into it, why Detroit? I have done some previous studies on Detroit where I've seen the land use change of Detroit over like last 50 years. And if you can see the maps that I made using Landsat data for the urban area, you can see that the urban high density, low density, and medium density categories have significantly declined over the last 5 decades. One of the reasons is that, next, one more time, is that we can see a significant population decline from 1970 to 2023. So Detroit almost lost half of its population over this last 5 decades. But recently, we're seeing a population projections from UN that in the next 10 years, Detroit will gain around 200,000 more people. So now it's a good time to redesign the city, plan the city in a better way. So that's the whole plot behind selecting Detroit. Next. For this demonstration, I'm using deep learning models that is using mask RCNN methods. It's pretty basic. We've all seen this graph, how it works. I'm gonna not go into details about it. Next, please. One of the things that I want to mention is that I ran this model on my standalone desktop PC, not using supercomputers, and it requires a significant computing power. So you need to have a CUDA-enabled PC, and if you manage the hardware on your own, then you can run these deep learning packages from ArcGIS Pro. Next. So just throwing out the resources here. So if you if you're interested, you can use this resources by yourself. Next. So that's the GitHub link. You need to download the libraries for ArcGIS. And once you install all of them, and if you have a GPU that is 6.1 or later, then you will be able to do this. Mine is like 8.1, and I'm using 10 gigabytes of GPU space to run the model that I'm working on. So the next step is getting the imagery. So next. Oh, before that, so once you install all the packages, this new menu opens up for you on ArcGIS. If you go into the toolbox, you can see all the list of the tools that you can use. Different kinds of tools here for deep learning packages, the regular ones, building footprint extraction, land cover classification, point classification, car detections, and general object detection. You can detect any object in the image that you have, and you can train the model to improve it over time, and then it can detect your object and extract the information for your spatial analysis. So let's go next. So one of the key features about using deep learning is that you have to have a really good data set. To be able to have a really good data set, you need a really good image that can actually distinguish between the objects that you want to use. I used Google Earth API for this. There's multiple levels of zoom that you can get the data from. This is zoom level 13. Next. This is zoom level 17, but we still can't see cars, which is my initial goal, to detect cars. So next. This is zoom level 21. This is almost over 800,000 tiles, and it takes a bit of time to get all of these tiles downloaded from Google if you're doing it on your own PC. But if you spend some time, there's some limitations that you can download a certain amount of tiles from Google in one day. So you have to wait a couple of days to fill the quota and get all the data. So next. So now, once you have that high resolution, I used zoom level 21 image, you run the initial model. And then you can see in the middle part of the image that it was able to successfully detect most cars, but you can also see that it didn't detect a lot of cars. And you can also see it detects some false detection. So for example, on the roof, on the right side on the middle image, you can see it detected the roof, part of the roof as a car. So what you have to do is that this is the initial model run. Then you can see the data on the right, on the left side of my image, and you can go through all the data and fix the ones that you don't think are cars. So once you fix the size, like it's based on the size of each car or based on the size of each detection, you can sort them out and discard the smaller sizes or too large sizes ones. And then you can fix that initial detection point so that you can use it to improve your model later on. So next. So once you have that initial findings, I have demonstrated this on 11 neighborhoods of Detroit. So after that initial data that you got from that initial run, you can retrain the model using your own input. So then you go through this one training neighborhood and go through all the cars that it didn't detect and input that into the model. Next. So that is the car right on that street if you follow the red line. And I have this around 632 cars the model and then to retrain the model. So next. Next. Okay, so once I've retrained the model and then ran it over all the neighborhoods, it from those 1600 car supervised car data, it managed to detect almost 12,000 cars all around the all in 11 neighborhoods. And it was accurate enough to detect cars that were even partially visible or shaded or different scenarios. As long as it's partially visible, it detected the car successfully. And it's not just after one run, you have to do multiple iterations and multiple times to change the accuracy of the model and retrain it so that it gives you really good result at the end. And then you can run that model over the city, and then it will give you a citywide car data for that image. So next. So there are some applications, basic applications just explaining how we can use it. So this was the image that I have used. Next. I think there is a lag. So next. So these are all the cars that were being detected from that image. And once you superimpose the road network, you can see the clusters of cars around the road networks, but not very meaningful in that sense. So you can add some more layers over it, and you can make some meaningful connections with the locations of cars. So next. These are so after that, I've added the neighborhood boundaries. Next. Then you can increase the size of the car so it makes more visible. Next. And this is where I have superimposed the land use classification data on top of that car layer. And you can see the darker the red, it's like the high density urban area. So you can see there's more clusters of cars around the darkest red areas all around this neighborhood and all are the highway or the road corridors. Next. One more time. And this is the last part, is that if you superimpose a temperature data of the area, you can also see the clusters of cars around the surface temperature around the area. This is just an example what you can do. There's more to be done. And the next part of the project is to see where the cars are located, if they're parked or if they're moving on the street. And then based on that, you can do some more analysis. So last slide. Thank you, everyone. I hope it made some sense. And if you have any questions, shoot me an email, and that would be awesome to connect and then collaborate if you want to do something. And also, I'm in the job market, so shoot me some sources if you have something going on and if you know something. And I appreciate your help and everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you, SM.